My name is Lauren Johnson. I'm the Director of Communications and Community Outreach at the Polk County Housing Trust Fund, and just really excited to moderate this panel discussion today. And so what we're going to be talking about is really the history of housing equity here in the city of Des Moines and in the metro. And what we're trying to understand is how the city of Des Moines, as well as the metro as a whole, got into the situation in housing equity, into the fact that we're still talking about it today. Right. And so just starting off, in the past year, the Polk County Housing Trust Fund has been lifting the conversation of housing equity in central Iowa and seeing disparities in home ownership between Black and white residents in Polk County uncovered by the One Economy State of Black Polk County report in 2017 and then again in 2020. We decided to dig deeper to better understand how historical policies have impacted this modern reality we now see. Similar to many American cities, the story of housing inequality and inequity in the city of Des Moines begins with the practice of redlining. So as many of you know, after going through the 21-day equity challenge, the practice of redlining really started in the 1930s. It was a federal policy that spread out to 239 cities across the United States, that really mandated where federal funds could be put into federally backed home loans and where they could not, based on maps that were created for each city. Of course, this is a pretty general overview. In digging into that history, we see that the areas that were not granted access to those funds were oftentimes, and most of the time, not granted access to those funds because of the race of the inhabitants of those neighborhoods. And the city of Des Moines did have a redlining map, and this practice really set the stage for many more inequitable and destructive housing policies to take place in the 20th century. In the city of Des Moines specifically, the practice of urban renewal and the construction of I-235 plowed right through the heart of a thriving Black community, Center Street. Not only did this practice destroy countless Black-owned businesses, but it also displaced many families. And so with all of that being said, it is my great honor to introduce Dr. Barbara Bruton, and just to share her family's story with urban renewal and the construction of I-235, and answer any questions that we may have. And so with that, I would just like to welcome Dr. Bruton to the stage. An additional part of this is that in our Undesign the Red Line experience, Dr. Bruton was really we like to say, the honorary chair of our committee, in which we collected these local stories. And so without further ado, I'll pass it over to Dr. Bruton to share those stories with you today.
Thank you very much, Lauren. And I am just thrilled to be part of this, so that I can share my story that I remember from back when I was like 8 years old. And to me, it's just amazing here, 64 years since then, I can finally share this story and know that it is being heard and things are being done in Des Moines. So I'm kind of gonna go across that way. But the work that you and Eric are doing, and the work with United Way and the Directors Council, all of that is of benefit to our community and is going to be, like furthering our foundation for change. So thank you very much. But what I remember is my grandmother was a homeowner, and she had worked really hard because her husband passed away when my father was like 14 years old. So he became like the man of the house because he had 4 younger sisters. So his mother and my father actually nurtured the development and the purchase of that home. So when the urban renewal even thought about coming, because I remember, there was a lot of talk about it. And so as we would be walking to church, walking up the hill, going to Corinthian, she was a member of Corinthian, and she would be fussing about how the city was going to take her home. And then at night when she was like braiding my hair, she talked about how the city was going to take her home. And then by the time I got 8 years old, that really happened. And so we all got displaced and dispersed. And she moved into a home that was not as large and not as nice as the one that she had, but that's all the money that she was given. And then we were able to move over to the east side. So what I remember most is like I had to change schools. So I went from Crocker over to Logan Elementary School, and that was a real unusual experience for me because I kept getting into trouble. And so finally the teacher came to our house and knocked on the door and said to my dad that, you know, she's causing me a lot of trouble. She's out of her seat all the time and she's talking to people. And my dad said, that's unusual because really she's a good one, you know? So he said, I will be up there first thing in the morning. So my dad and myself and the teacher and the principal, we were all there. And of course, I was crying and snobbing because I wasn't used to being in trouble. And so my dad said, this is what the teacher says, and I support schools, but I want to know, what are you doing? And I said, well, they don't know how to read, and I was just trying to help them read. And so the teacher said, she doesn't know how to read. And my dad said, oh, yes, she does. She's been reading since she was like 4 or 5 years old. She's got a sister, and she teaches her sister how to read. So she does know how to read. He said, so is that what you're doing? And I said, yes. And so he said, well, here's what I think you need to do. And then the teacher interrupted, but she's from Crocker. She can't know how to read. So there was all of these different expectations about where you lived and what you could do rather than really looking at the situation. So, you know, thinking forward, this is the way parenting has to be. You just got to be in there with your kids and asking the questions, because there's typically, you know, a story behind the story. And no telling what would have happened to me if my dad hadn't gone up there. I don't know. I probably would have been expelled or whatever. And for trying to be a good citizen, oh my gosh, he didn't like that at all. So we got that situation straight, but we ran into another one when I went to middle school and I was in the 7-1s, and this teacher recognized that I shouldn't have been in a 7-1 because it went to like 12, you know. So they had them leveled out. And so the teacher came to my house again and he says, your daughter is in 7-1, and why is she in 7-1? And my dad said, well, what is 7-1? Because they didn't even really know what that was. And he said, she's way beyond that. And so my dad said, well, I'll be up there in the morning. And so we went up there, and then I ended up being in the 7-12s. And then what happened is I started getting on this honor roll. And so my friends were like, why is your name on there? So I started running around and crossing it out because I still wanted to have my friends, but I didn't want to be on the honor roll. But anyway, it's those kinds of things that impact. But what happens though is, though, even though we were like poor, we were really poor people, but we were not allowed to think poorly. There wasn't nothing that you could not do, you know. So let's just figure it out and let's get it done and get you where you're supposed to be. So things my dad did a lot was, you know, bicycle parts. If kids' bicycles were broken, he fixed them. He should have been an engineer. If he hadn't have dropped out or had to drop out at 8th grade and 14 years old, he probably would have been an astronaut. I don't know, because he's just a very, very brilliant but resourceful man. And then my mother was like the mother of all mothers. You know, my brothers would have friends over and they would say, can we have dinner with you? So most of the time we had dinner with like 14 different people, you know, because we came from neighborhoods that were very close, you know. So sometimes people say, well, that's the Logan neighborhood, but there's a lot of richness in neighborhoods. And that's why, you know, I like dedicate my work to, you know, trying to bring forward that kind of richness and resourcefulness. The other thing, even though I had to move and I got displaced, we had a neighbor and she put everybody in the car, and you're going to Mount Olive and you're going to be a usher, or you're going to be in the Sunday school. So I came up through Mount Olive Baptist Church, and that made a huge difference. At graduation, you got your Bible. It was signed by the minister. So it was those things that helped me break through. And then I went to Tech High School, and my homeroom teacher said, "When have you applied for college?" That's what she said. And I said, "No, I can't go because I don't have any money." And even though that was back in the 60s and there were all these loans and things, my parents finally were able to own their home on the east side. But I mean, it was not like we were rich. I mean, everything that they had to go into holding that home and paying for it. And so she said, "Oh, no, 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 no." My teacher did. And so she started signing me up and having me fill out these forms and all of this stuff. And so I got a scholarship to Northeast Missouri State. So a lot of people say, "You're from Iowa, but why did you go to Northeast Missouri State?" It's because they offered me the scholarship. That's why I went. And so then I finished like in 3.5 years. I wanted to student teach in Iowa, so I student taught in Ottumwa, and then I came back to Des Moines. And by the time I came back to Des Moines, Dr. Jim Bowman was like the associate superintendent, and that's when he was doing this mass hiring because he wanted that instructional staff to look like the kids that they were going to serve. And so I was hired by Des Moines Public Schools. But Des Moines has always been a great community. I mean, there's hills and lumps and valleys and all of that kind of stuff, but there's also lots of places. And that's me standing right by Mercy Hospital, because we did not live on Center Street. We actually lived on 3rd Street. And so right where Mercy is situated was sort of like the alleyway for us. And so I can remember standing on that hill and looking over at the river. So that's the community that I was in. And the probably the last thing that I want to say, because I can go on and on talking about this, but the opportunity to actually retire and do the things that I love to do when I want to do them is what the Vista opportunity, offered to me. And so I did a year with the Food Bank of Iowa. Last year, I was with Neighborhood Finance Corporation and just really got into the being able to help families move into affordable quality homes that may need a little bit of TLC, which is what NFC offers, a great staff to work with. And I'm just excited every time we get a yes, we want to work with NFC, because I know that there's going to be a great family experience that goes in there. So kind of my story.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Bobretta. And Bobretta really touched on a lot of things that I think we're going to come back to at multiple times. One is just the idea of neighborhood and how important that is. And two is this idea of displacement. And so on the idea of neighborhood and kind of sticking in line with talking about how Des Moines has developed over time, I'm excited to bring Linda Carter-Lewis into this discussion as well to talk a little bit about the evolution of downtown and importantly, the neighborhood she grew up in. And so, I can just kind of start this off with a couple of questions as well. But thank you so much for joining again, Linda. Very honored to have you. So the first is just, what are the most significant changes that you've seen in your time living in the city of Des Moines?
Good afternoon, everyone, and I'm thrilled to be here to share some life experiences and also history, because we've got to know our history so we can appreciate all the changes. Anyhow, I echo kind of what Bobby said about all the things that she sees going on now in Des Moines. Very different. As I grew up in Des Moines, I would like to kind of start with both my mother was born and raised in Des Moines. My dad came here from Oklahoma by way of Buxton, and he had to drop out of school at the sixth grade. But that didn't let him. He didn't let that stop him, because to talk with him and to know him, you would have thought he had at least some college. He was very able to make his way. Anyhow, when I was born, they lived over on Southeast 18th and Scott, if you know where that is. That big, you see those big, what do you call it, elevators or whatever, over by the railroad tracks. Anyhow, and at 6 months, they moved over to 13th and Jefferson. Between 13th and 14th and Jefferson, not too far from Broadlawns Hospital and a block over from Chautauqua Parkway. And Chautauqua Parkway at that time was a red line district, of a district where Black people could not buy a house in Chautauqua Parkway. I'm not sure, because I didn't even know to talk with my parents about it, but based on what I learned through going through the exhibit at Undesign the Red Line, which I'm so thrilled that they're doing, and that they're sharing this information with people so that these things don't happen again, or so we can break away from making decisions like that and give all people a chance. But at any rate, he got in touch with or found a person who was willing to sell their house to him. And I found the papers that they signed, and I've got to give a copy of them to Lauren. But anyhow, so that's why we were able to move to that location. And it was a neighborhood that had, at that time, it may have had one other Black family on the block. So that was quite different. As I grew up, there were about 3 grocery stores, those mom and pop grocery stores that you could walk to. And it was interesting because there was, out of the 3, there was one that we went to all the time because they were friendly. The other grocery stores, when we would go into those grocery stores, it was like we were aliens walking in. You know, they watched us like a hawk, and they waited on us, but they were not friendly like the other grocery store was. So that's one of the experiences that I think about. As far as downtown, I loved to go downtown. I would take the bus and go downtown, just about every Saturday, and just spend time walking from 7th and Walnut all the way down to 3rd and Walnut, going in and out of all the stores. Yeah, I'm a shopper. Anyhow, and it was, the big department stores, as well as what we used to call the dime stores, which are kind of like the Dollar Trees, the little the whatnot stores, where you get the knickknacks and all of that. And then they had a few other businesses and things like that, and drugstores. That's kind of what was on that main street. When we look at it today, wow, just quite a change. But what I love about it, because being born and raised in Des Moines, I love Des Moines, have never wanted to leave Des Moines. And as I see it do things, it makes me so happy that they're positive things. It hurts when I see things that are not positive going on and happening in Des Moines. Some of the things they've torn down or gotten rid of or moved out of people's reach, those things kind of hurt. And I hate to see those things happen. But for the most part, I love what I see going on downtown. It's just such a real change to see so much housing in downtown. I never would have dreamed that you'd have people flocking and just clamoring to live downtown, in a high rise or, in the beautiful, condos and things they're developing down there. So I think that's good. One thing that bothers me though, extremely so, and I know you didn't ask me to say this, Lauren, but I mean, as I talk about how wonderful it is and how great it is, what hurts is to know that we still have so many homeless people that are still struggling, starving, no home, and just barely making it, and sometimes not making it. And that hurts me to my heart. And that's one reason why I stay involved in many things and try to be actively involved, if not working with the things, certainly donating and contributing to causes that will help those who are less fortunate. And right now, so many people who just through no fault of their own find themselves in the food line, find themselves unable to pay their rent. And I'm just hoping that as we move through this pandemic, that those things are going to be addressed and that we're going to be able to help those people get back in homes, be able to find jobs, and have plenty of food for their families. Anyhow, that was just kind of an overview. Were there some things that I've mentioned before, Lauren, that you wanted me to kind of touch on?
That's wonderful. And thank you for that. And would just like to know, kind of about how the neighborhood you grew up in, you kind of talked about the grocery stores that were around there, how that neighborhood has changed over time, either for the better or for the worse. And then we'll kind of get over to just revitalization and what we can all do going forward to make sure that everyone has equitable access to housing, because that's really the central issue of this is, whether it be our very low income populations or other populations, like you said, with the homelessness. And we're certainly going to, have our hands full going forward after COVID, but making sure that everybody has access across the income level, across race and gender and whatever it may be, that everybody has equal access to having someone that's safe and stable and affordable, yes, to live. But with that being said, would just love to hear about how that neighborhood that you lived in has changed over time, or what you've seen over time.
Okay. There was a grade school on the corner of 16th and Jefferson. That is no longer a grade school. It is Jesse. Just drew a blank.
Your education center.
Yes. Anyhow, but Chautauqua is still a nice neighborhood. It isn't as elegant or as exclusive as it once was, but it's still a nice neighborhood. The area of Jefferson on up to Clark, between Jefferson and Clark, it's kind of hit and miss. There's still nice homes. They've refurbished some homes or kept them up. Many homes have been torn down. My home that I grew up in was torn down, and I'm in the process of trying to get that land turned over to Habitat, so that there will be another home on that property. I'm sure hoping that can work out. But anyhow, there are a lot of vacant lots, things like that. It's an area that could use some help in becoming a nice area for middle to low income families, and even for families who can afford a pretty good home, so that they have a good mix in there. But at any rate, there aren't grocery stores. Now we have to get in the car and go to a grocery store. So, there's nothing that's close. The closest thing is Hy-Vee on Euclid. And so, and the mix of incomes that's in that is probably moderate, real moderate to lower income. to folks who are really, really struggling in that area.
So one thing that Linda talked about is really, the need for some sort of investment or revitalization, as there are a lot of vacant lots in that area. And I think that's a good transition point to talk a little bit about current or modern day revitalization efforts and how that can be done once again equitably. So this is really important because, as we all know, the buzzword that's going around nowadays is gentrification. And so we want to make sure that we are reinvesting in our neighborhoods in a way that does not displace folks like we did, however many years ago, and like we just heard about. And so I'm very, very excited to now introduce Brienne Bai, the executive director of the 6th Avenue Corridor, because over the past 10 years, 6th Avenue has undergone many incredible changes that have provided and done a lot of good for that community. And so with that being said, happy to welcome Brienne to discuss that transformation and really describe how that has been done in a way that lifts up the entire neighborhood. And so welcome, Brienne.
Thank you, Lauren. And what an honor to follow Bobby and Linda and hear their stories today. Always so much value in that. I am the executive director of the 6th Avenue Corridor Urban Neighborhood Main Street Program, and we focus on 6th Avenue. This is a photograph that I like to share. This is actually at 6th and University in the late 1930s. So in the left side, that's where McDonald's is now. But you can just see in this image that 6th Avenue has been certainly a multimodal and mixed use environment for a long time. We focus on 6th Avenue from Mercy Hospital and DMAC Urban Campus north to the Des Moines River Bridge. And so we're about a 1.2 mile section through there. We're a small nonprofit, one staff. But we do have an active board of directors comprised of residents of the community, stakeholders, business owners, et cetera. We were founded about 10 years ago when there was really an effort to think about how to revitalize in a very grassroots way that was led by input from residents. So in this work, I live on 6th Avenue. I live at 6th and Franklin, raising my kids here. I love the neighborhood. Have been here a number of years now. And so thinking about this work within the context of the area's history, originally it was North Des Moines, incorporated in 1880 here north of University. It had its own mayor, it had its own city council, own waterworks, school district, all of that. So it's been a vibrant area that has, I think, retained kind of a legacy of advocacy and independence. The corridor itself, as being an important kind of spine, a commercial and cultural spine through North Des Moines, has really, the corridor and the area surrounding it has really welcomed since the early 1900s waves of new immigrants, waves of just different population, and has had such a strong diversity from just the very early 1900s. Here's the old Jewish deli, Moines Deli, that was just north of University. Here's a market that was along 6th Avenue that's no longer there. This is at 6th and Forest. A lot of folks remember, I talk with a lot. I love talking with a lot of older people who have experienced the area over the decades. And for me, that's a way of contextualizing this work within the people who have lived here for a long time. So building relationships and listening to stories and getting input about what people would like to see. We are an area that has, again, seen and continues to see, new immigrants, new Iowans, new Americans, refugees, et cetera. And so just listening to the varied voices. This is there at 6th and Forest. This is up at 6th and Franklin. I love sharing some of these. This is the Jewish Community Center that used to sit at 9th and College. A lot of area residents have fond memories of swimming at the swimming pool and going to the community center after school. And so thinking about the vibrancy of the institutions, the businesses, the churches, the connections, the relationships that people had, and then thinking about what redlining, this is Des Moines Redlining Map from, I think this is from 36. Lauren, you might be able to correct me if you know the exact date on it. But
we kind of go back and forth.
Sure. Okay. But here we are. They're at 6th Avenue up here. So 6th Avenue, it bridges 2 census tracts right now, and it also bridges two of the map kind of areas between a D, which is a red area, and a C, which was a yellow caution sort of area. I'll move through there a little bit. I have a passion for digging into history. So Linda, I really appreciate your comments. Looking back at the legacy of what that project 235, combining that with redlining and then the infrastructure itself, the legacy of the changes that wrought in neighborhoods. And this is just looking north to where we are, north of 235. So in addition to redlining 235, we also saw that over time, the corridor was really thought of as a way to get vehicles to and from downtown Des Moines. That was the priority. So it expanded from being a streetcar line and having sidewalks and 2 lanes of traffic to being 5 lanes, narrow sidewalks interrupted by utility poles, snow on the narrow sidewalks during the winter time. And so we have been advocating, initially we were established as a way for the community to have a focused advocacy for physical changes to support small business development here on the corridor. And we're just loving what we're seeing here. You see La Tapatia and Tacos La Familia. Tacos La Familia is exactly the type of locally based economic development that we are so focused on fostering. They live here in the neighborhood, 2 streets over. They had a catering business. They had a dream of opening a restaurant. And so they moved into that space, and they are just thriving, and it's so good for the area. I know I'm supposed to speak a little bit about funding. So this project, the Streetscape project, it does include green infrastructure components. We're adding over 150 new street trees. Trees oftentimes, I think, get a little overlooked in the impact that they have on the psychology of our neighborhoods and the mental health aspects. But new street trees, we have a multi-use path for cyclists and pedestrians, and then certainly kind of calming the traffic down with 3 lanes. The 3-phase project, so it will eventually extend all the way to 235. The 3-phase project is likely to be upwards of $10 million. We've had to fundraise for over $1 million of that ourselves, and it has been a combined effort of attracting various grants as a focused nonprofit. Certainly the Community Foundation has been a strong supporter. And in thinking about how we balance, from my perspective, very much equity-based type infrastructure investments. So it was an unequitable environment before to be able to have open a small business and not have people feel comfortable to be able to walk or really know that you were there, to balance these infrastructure investments. And now I see kids out walking along 6th Avenue together and riding their bike, and before it was like, no, you can't go that close to 6th, it's too dangerous. But also then balancing how we invest and partner with entities that are investing in affordable housing. Here's a project at 1811 6th Avenue. It was a vacant original mansion that had been turned into apartments many years ago, back in the 1920s. And then a gentleman purchased it, acquired some IFA funding, and now it is affordable housing primarily focused on veterans. So it's incredible. Yeah. Also partnering with folks like Jack Hatch, who's working on a project right now. This is a low-income housing tax credit project. Polk County Housing Trust Fund has invested in it as well. There's a vacant parcel just north of McDonald's. And so this project will really focus on supportive housing. It's also in partnership with YSS. And so it'll have a blend of income availability. And so thinking about housing options intermixed with Other projects, historic rehab projects, we've put out surveys. What do people love most about the area? They love the diversity, they love the people, they love their neighborhoods, they love the history. They want to see that history invested in, saved. We do have some development opportunities. And so we as foster parents for a few properties think about how we can also require affordable housing to be part of those. I'll just blow through, sorry. We've also been thinking about the community aspect of all this, investing in public art that celebrates and really invests in local diverse artists. Here we're going to be within the year installing art bus shelters designed by Sheena Rose, and they are just so incredibly vibrant and they really reflect the positivity and energy of the area. Here's our selection committee. So engaging in diverse perspectives on how to make these decisions and events. We've hosted cleanup events and music events to try to bring people together. COVID's challenged us in many ways right now with those types of projects, but we'll be really excited to get back to that. Here's that thriving area at Tacos La Familia and La Tapatía. If you haven't stopped into those businesses, please do so. And then we love what's happening there at 6th and College with Good Vibes Yoga. It's a donation-based yoga and other types of really community well-being classes, and they do a lot of outreach. We have a new business there at 6th and Franklin. So we're just, we're very excited. We're intending to continue to foster that vibrancy and do so in from my perspective, in an intentional and incremental manner, rather than that really then balances investment and and impact over time, rather than having outside entities, outside money, outside decision making, and too much too fast for neighborhoods. Happy to answer any questions, whether now, here's my contact information. Anyone can certainly contact me after the panel.
Great. Thank you so much, Brienne. And I think it's really interesting just talking about this affordability component. And once again, just ensuring that as we go forward with these plans, that we are providing opportunities for everyone to live in these neighborhoods, because that opportunity has not been provided over time. And so very happy to hear about the resources that Brienne has been able to utilize very creatively. But you may be wondering, okay, well, what can people use at an individual level, or how can individuals really move themselves closer to home ownership? Because this is really what we see and what has been impacted over time in the very large gap between Black and white homeownership, specifically here in Polk County and in the city of Des Moines. And so I'm very excited once again to introduce now Stephanie Murphy, the Executive Director of the Neighborhood Finance Corporation, to talk a little bit about what the Neighborhood Finance Corporation is and what tools and programs are available for homeowners or those who are looking to purchase a home right now in our city.
Excuse me, Lauren.
Yeah.
This is Linda. I just wanted to make a comment to Brienne. I had not heard all of that information about what all's going on 6th Avenue. That is just thrilling to know, because that I forgot to mention, but that is an area that I frequented. I walked to school, high school every day, going down 6th Avenue across that bridge, and all those buildings and things that she was showing, I can picture them. And to see that they're being refurbished, they're being saved, the history of the area is being reclaimed and repurposed, but for a purpose that's going to help so many people. That just thrills me to pieces. If I get nothing else out of the panel today, I'm very happy. Thank you, Brienne.
Well, we enjoy it as well. Thank you, Lauren. Neighborhood Finance Corporation's office is on 6th Avenue and has been there for about 25 years. So we enjoy seeing the changes. So Neighborhood Finance Corporation is a nonprofit mortgage company. Provide loans and forgivable loans for people.
Stephanie, your audio is kind of going in and out there. Just want to make sure everybody can hear this wonderful information.
I don't know why, but I'll switch to my earbuds.
Perfect. And, you know, I think kind of following up with what Linda said about Brienne's presentation, what's so important is that when we talk about this history, it's really not all doom and gloom, right? There are things happening right now in our city to really right these wrongs. And I think that that's something we should all be grateful for. And if, you know, as we go on in this conversation in the next 10 minutes or so, we should all be inspired to take actions like are being taken on the 6th Avenue corridor to continue this work throughout the city.
Great. Hopefully this is better.
It is. Thank you.
Okay, sorry about that.
Yes.
So, great, wonderful. So, Neighborhood Finance Corporation, we were created 30 years ago in response to the disinvestment that had happened in the neighborhoods that Brienne showed on the redlining map, or if you saw that interactive map that was on day 7 of the equity challenge. And the whole idea when we were created, we were part of a larger revitalization plan. It was called Stockard and Engler. And we were the financing part. So to bring that affordable, accessible capital to neighborhoods that had been disinvested in. And so we continue to do that. You know, certainly there's been challenges. The foreclosure crisis presented a challenge to our organization. And we are challenged also by what came out with the Directors Council One Economy report. And as an organization looking at how we can help expand minority homeownership in our community. But we have served over 6,800 households and invested over $400 million in the neighborhoods that we serve. We currently lend in Des Moines, West Des Moines, Windsor Heights, soon in Urbandale, and then we also have an office in Cedar Rapids. So that's what we do. Please go to our website. I'm not going to use more time just talking about that, because if you're interested specifically either for someone you know that lives in one of our neighborhoods, we have an interactive map, or that wants to purchase a home. There's a lot that goes into it because we believe in affordable home ownership. We want people to buy a house with a loan that is affordable to them, and then also be able to do the renovations so that that home is safe and sound for their family.
Great. And, you know, as we talk about reinvesting in neighborhoods, and, you know, always come back to this word of gentrification, or, you know, just to put that more simply, because I don't know if we have enough time to really have a broader definition of that, but, you know, to put it simply, really just pricing folks out of their existing neighborhoods. How does Neighborhood Finance Corporation, and how do you guys prevent that as you reinvest in homes and, you know, raise the property values of those homes as well in that investment?
So what we generally find is that people use our program because a typical loan, it's not easy to do an NFC loan. And I'm sure there's people on this call that have done it, because anytime you combine home purchase along with home renovation, it's a lot to do. And so where people really take advantage of our program is if it wasn't for it, that project probably would not get done, because we have the forgivable loan. And so I look at neighborhoods where that appraisal gap is still needed. And basically what that means is the cost of purchasing and renovating that home is not going to be the same as that value. And so what we find, for instance, Sherman Hill, we lent a lot in Sherman Hill in the early days. We really don't do much lending in Sherman Hill anymore because the market works there. Now it's gentrified, but somewhat. But that's, we're really in the neighborhoods where that gap is needed to make it affordable and for the value.
Absolutely. And so thank you for that. And so one kind of idea that I know that you've talked about before, and I think is really interesting, is this idea of affordable capital. Could you explain what you mean by that?
Sure. So for instance, if you were to live in a city other than Des Moines and you wanted to buy a house and do renovations with it, you would most likely get a first mortgage at 80% and then a second mortgage that the bank would provide at a higher interest rate. Well, because we have this long time partnership between the local financial institutions in town, neighborhood finance, the neighborhoods, and the local governments that we work with, we're able to do two things: a low interest second mortgage, so it's at 2% interest, and then everyone that purchases or refinances through us gets up to a $10,000 forgivable loan, and same with the home improvement loan. So up to 10,000. And so that really creates a lot of affordability. We find people that come in and refinance and do their home improvements with us. And because we don't have mortgage insurance as well, they're able to lower their payment while they get their roof done, their driveway fixed, those sorts of things. Not always, it depends how much renovations they're doing, but often their payment will be lower. So that's what we mean. Also, we partner with organizations like the Evelyn K. Davis Center and Working Families and Home Inc. because we believe that home buyer education is so important as well. And then we provide down payment assistance. We've done over 800 down payment loans in Polk County in the past few years.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's incredible. And so once again, there are so many good things happening in the Metro and in Des Moines specifically to discuss this issue. And it looks like we have about 5 minutes left. So I'd love to open it up to the group and just pose the question, I should say. What have you seen, let's say, in the past 10 or so years as far as development goes, as it pertains to housing, that really encourages you that we're going in the right direction? And that direction, of course, is to provide housing access to more people. Or is there anything that you've seen, once again, say in the past 10 years that has discouraged you that we're not going in that direction that we should be? And so I'll kind of open it up to the group if anybody wants to bite first.
The past 10 years have been tough. I think being negative, I think that it's been tough. We have been able to raise some capital, so that's been helpful to our program. But I do think that, as a city, we know that, and Lauren, you know the numbers better than anybody, but we have a real affordable housing crisis. And we need to get serious about how to solve that with existing homes that we have through home ownership, as well as developing more rental. So I'll be the Debbie Downer. Hopefully someone has a positive.
I've been encouraged by the very small gains in support for accessory dwelling units in our neighborhoods. I think that's an opportunity to really grow and add various affordable housing options within markets in our neighborhoods. I'd like to see that conversation move forward. I do find, for our urban neighborhoods, I think there is a growing realization that we have to approach our aging housing stock as an asset rather than just a negative and a problem that we have to deal with. I don't think that we've necessarily solved it. I think there are more tools out there from other cities to look at, thinking about how we can fill the gaps in our neighborhoods and not continue to kind of allow demolition by neglect and encourage home ownership versus perhaps purchasing of properties by out of town or out of state owners that then those properties then become eroded. So I think there are some positives and certainly still remaining challenges.
Great.
Can I just speak to that real quick too? I mean, just to put in a plug, the Neighborhood Homes Investment Act is moving through Congress and it's getting some traction, and that would do some of what Brienne was talking about. So if you have an inclination to contact your legislative leaders in DC, that would be a good thing to reach out if you care about the issue.
Great. And Stephanie, could you maybe write the name of that act of that legislation, I should say, in the chat, just so folks can keep that. And then I do want to pose one maybe final question to Barbara and to Linda. And, we started this conversation off talking about your lived experience in the city of Des Moines throughout these changes and through this urban renewal and throughout these really inequitable policies. What would you like to see for the city going forward and say in the next 20 years? What would be the ideal thing to really make this a more equitable situation all around? And just more broadly, what would you like to see in the city?
I would really, I'm just praying that this charge, I want to call it, or this this move to really recognize all of the inequities that we've endured all forever, that people will continue to learn about it, get to understand it, so that they know why people are suffering the way they are. You know, too many people think that people people of color, Black people, live the way they live because they want to, or because they just won't put any effort in it, because they just won't work, because of a whole bunch of negative things. There are so many, the majority, it's through no fault of their own or through circumstances that by which they've been impacted, because simply the color of their skin, or simply because of the way they talk, or simply because of the lack of, they've had a lot of bad breaks, and, you know, through no fault of their own. I just am praying that if the understanding and the changes can continue, that we will have a better city. We will have a city that is welcoming, and that where we have the majority, and, you know, I mean, a real majority of the city really living and interacting and doing for those who are still less fortunate, trying to work together to make it a beautiful city. And remember, what did we used to call Des Moines, the surprising place, or, you know, the most beautiful city? That's what we need to still be looking to try to be, and to stop just turning our heads and ignoring all of the people who are suffering and need help, and especially our young people, you know, and those students that are really, really struggling and living on the streets. That's my hope.
Thank you.
And my hope is health and education, health, access to health. Because if we don't have that, I mean, we can look at where we are now. If we don't have that health piece, then anything else that we would like to see happen probably is not going to happen. And then the other part is education. And education right now is really under threat because we have so many children out of school and teachers not being able to teach. So we've got to get that improved. So I hope and pray about health access and equal education opportunities. Now, if we get that, then we can go to jobs. We've got to have jobs that pay so families can keep food on the table and be able to afford that shelter, whatever that might be. But ultimately, I would love for everybody to actually own their own home. I mean, that's a beautiful thing, because to me, that's the foundation of beginning your wealth experience. But I also know you got to have these other things that's like the building bricks for that. And I do think Des Moines is trying to move in the right direction. And again, I want to thank, you know, Eric and what they're doing with Polk County, you know, Trust, and also what Liz Buck is doing with 26,000 people now learning the story behind the story.
Yes.
You know, if we get that, then there's going to be more people out there that can do the advocacy work that needs to be done. So it's just a lot of prayer. Like my brother said the other day, I had to oil my knees because it was just getting too crazy. I just had to pray. And he's the guy, I think that's the first time he ever talked to me about prayer. But it's that we've got to get straightened out. But again, in the meantime, the rest of us need to keep doing what we're doing, because I think about when I'm out there pursuing, you know, Polk County and looking at what kind of opportunities there are. You know, I see great things happening over on the east side, you know, Capitol area, Fairgrounds, Accent, MLK areas where houses are going in, you know, but that's not taking care of the whole big problem. But we got to do what we can do when we can do it. So thanks so much. I love telling my grandmother's story.
Absolutely. And I think we'll be doing it in a few minutes as well. And with that, I think it's time for us to wrap up. But a very big thank you to Linda Carter-Lewis, to Brienne Bai, Dr. Bobretta Bruton, and Stephanie Murphy for joining us. The links to the other breakout rooms, or the second breakout rooms, are in the chat. And a big thank you to United Way and to the Greater Des Moines Partnership for hosting this discussion this afternoon and focusing on these very important topics, and to you all for joining in today. So thank you very much, and on to the next.